Hello, Dog Nation. Welcome into Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, our weekly opportunity to make some picks when it comes to the big weekends worth of college football games from a point spread perspective. We also keep track of these as well. Some weeks I'm not quite so happy to hear that. This was probably one of those. But nonetheless, it's a great chance to just look at the big games of the weekend and figure out who knows what about what when it comes to all of this. This week, obviously, we're talking about Georgia and its final road game of the regular season, traveling to Starkville to take on Mississippi State, and a ranked matchup in the SEC between Missouri and Texas A&M, and of course, some of the bigger games outside the SEC we've seen in a couple of weeks here too. Big one in the Big 12 and a ranked matchup in the Big 10 before it's all said and done too. But first, before we look at any of that and hear from our DawgNation panel, which includes Mike Griffith and Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, Kaylee Mansell, and myself, and of course, Dari Perro from R.S. Andrews, let's go back and take a look at what happened last week, where I tell you, the big story right now is a red-hot Mike Griffith, who was 5-1 a week ago, now 26-22 on the year. That puts him on the plus side, even against the VIG thus far this year. So Mike in money territory here. There's a glut of folks, unfortunately, at 3-3. That includes Dari, Jeff, and myself. That puts Dari and Jeff at 24-24 on the year. Me, unfortunately, losing on the season at 23-25. Then you got Connor 2-4 last week at 20-26 on the year. Kaylee, rough week for her, 1-5. Now 19-27 on the year. So good job by Mike to put a little distance between himself and some of the competition and to get somebody into the plus money for the year. But of course, with Dari, Jeff, and me nipping in his heels, still plenty of time for anything to happen. And frankly, even Connor and Kaylee could flip this thing and still be at the top before it's all said and done. So, Dari, those are the standings. You've been hot as of late. A little bit of a pre-rally decline with the 3-3 week. How do you feel about this week's slate before we move into the picks?
Oh, well, I think my lock of the year would be that Connor cannot flip it and take the lead before the end of the year. I would put money on that.
Well, there you go.
I think he's too far. I think he's too far back going against Mike's new system, whatever that is.
I tell you.
Maybe paid service. Maybe he's got a Matthew McConaughey guy that he's calling in these picks for. I feel pretty good. I kind of got hosed. I thought I should have had another 4-2 last week with the Missouri Arkansas Mississippi State Arkansas game, but I'm ready to track Mike down now that he's out in front, and I feel good about this week.
Well, speaking of being out in front, Georgia among the SEC teams out in front of the latest college football playoff top 25, coming in ranked number 5 after a win last week against Florida. Now, though, go back into hostile territory in Davis Wade Stadium in Starkville, Mississippi. The Mississippi State Bulldogs, as Dari just mentioned, fresh off their first SEC win since the 2023 season, now 5-4 on the year, seeking that one more win for bowl eligibility after knocking off the Razorbacks 38-35. They have been strong at home this year, 5-0 against the spread there in Starkville. Of course, the highlight was the non-conference upset win over Arizona State. Georgia 7-1, beat Florida last week, splitting the difference when it comes to the SEC games here thus far, 3-3 against the spread against the league. But certainly looking at an inside track to return to the college football playoff if it can keep up its winning ways. But as far as the point spread's concerned, we're going to call Georgia here a 7.5-point favorite, and we're going to ask Mike what his system says about that after a red-hot 5-1 week last week. Mike, what do you want to do with Georgia favored 7.5 against the league's other Bulldogs on Saturday?
Well, I'd like to get a little bit more information on your line. I have seen it at 8.5. Where I'm wondering, did that fall somewhere? Because I want all the information possible that I can get.
I just typically use FanDuel.
Okay.
And that FanDuel's not a sponsor. I just typically use FanDuel. So yeah, I had it at 7.5 at FanDuel. So that's what I had.
Okay. Yeah, you see that glaring 5-0 against the spread from Mississippi State. I believe that was at home this year. Man, this team's 3 wins away or 3 plays away from 8-1. And you think about their offense, the way they use the splits, very similar to Tennessee. And we remember how much space Tennessee had to throw the ball. Jeff Lebby on the SEC coaches teleconference says it's going to be a great day. The cowbells, Kirby's concerned, slow starts on the road at Auburn and Tennessee already. Everything points to Mississippi State except for one thing, and that is when Georgia played a noon kickoff against Kentucky, they came ready to play. And I realized that Mississippi State broke a 16-game SEC losing streak with the win over Arkansas, and there's a lot of positivity. But I think Georgia's win over Florida was valuable too. I'm going to take Georgia to cover the spread, and I know that goes against the trend here, Brandon. I'm very well aware that I'm going out on a limb here, but I think it's time to pick the Bulldogs and give the points in Starkville.
So that is Mike on that. I will also clarify. FanDuel now does have this listed at 8.5. Like I said, FanDuel's not a sponsor. It's just a clean app that I like to use. 7.5 last night, 8.5 here right now. So if you want a free points worth of spread value, by all means, feel free to take it. Jeff Sintel, how about for you?
Following the system that is, I believe, gone 19-5 during Mike's stretch here, he was wise to quote all these games that Mississippi State should have won: the home game against Texas, the home game against Tennessee. But I don't really see this trend continuing. I like Georgia here. FPI tells you a story about there's still a pronounced difference between these teams. I just think Georgia's more talented. I think Georgia's getting a little bit healthier, especially across the offensive line. And I think they're going to run the ball with reckless abandon this weekend in Starkville. The bells will ring silent come 4 o'clock Central Standard Time in Starkville. Give me the Dogs. Big way.
So there you go, Jeff Sintel on the side of Georgia. So a little bit of Georgia love here to kick things off. Connor Riley, what about you?
I will also be taking Georgia this week.
So a clean sweep on Georgia here thus far. Kaylee Manziel, what about for you?
Yeah, if there was ever a time for Georgia to have a win that was more than one touchdown, this is the one, so give me the Dogs.
So clean sweep on Georgia here thus far. I can't get there. You look at Georgia conference road games since 2023, 7-2 straight up, but just 3-6 against the number. I also dove a little bit deep on November road games in particular. They are 6-1 straight up in November road games since the 2021 season, but just 4-3 against the spread. Think about closer than it was supposed to be Kentucky in 2022, closer than it was supposed to be Tech in 2023, lost to Ole Miss a year ago, obviously in Oxford, also coming in the month of November. I don't expect this to be a Georgia loss. And frankly, I think that we'll probably see a better version of Georgia against Texas next Saturday. But it could be enough just to pump the brakes a little bit on what is a team that's feeling some momentum and feeling some enthusiasm. But this is still a team that's mostly playing close games week in, week out, including an interim coaching staff last week for a Florida team that had played bad enough. Obviously, the original coach had gotten fired. That's not enough for me to be overwhelmingly confident going into a road game on Saturday. So I will take Mississippi State plus the 7.5. I've also mostly been grasping at straws when it comes to Georgia picks this year, so do with that what you will. But I'll prevent it from a clean sweep, Dari, but the flow is still heavy on the side of Georgia. You want to go with the flow and take Georgia plus the 7.5, minus the 7.5.
Yeah, I mean that's proven to be a big number for Georgia, is getting over that 7 mark to cover. But I actually like them here. I mean, I'm going against the grain. I mean, Mississippi State's been competitive in all their games. They're much improved from last year. But I just have a feeling Georgia's going to get a nice cover in this game. So like it's going to be like Novocaine. I agree with Jeff here. There's going to be a lot of running the ball, controlling the clock. I think it's a slow drip. Nice victory for Georgia here.
So a lot of love for Georgia. I obviously hope the panel is right, and I am wrong, but nonetheless, I am the lone dissenter on Georgia minus 7.5 here for right now. Speaking of 7.5 point spreads, we'll stay with that number and in the SEC as Texas A&M, fresh off a number 3 ranking by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee on Tuesday night, gets ready to go to Missouri. Obviously, the big story here from Missouri is the injury to Bo Pribula, quarterback Matt Zollers, a name that a lot of Georgia fans will recognize from the recruiting trail in years past. He'll step in as the starting quarterback here. Missouri's sitting at 6-2 after being off last week. A&M riding high at 8-0, but just 3-4 against the spread thus far as a favorite here this season, minus the one FCS game you would assume on that. So A&M going to Missouri. Number is 7.5. Mike Griffith, we come back to you.
Yeah, it's a desperate Missouri team on the brink of elimination. I think the college football playoff selection committee did Texas A&M a favor last night when they ranked them number 3, despite their eye-opening strength of schedule in the top 5, whereas Ohio State and Indiana are in the mid-30s. I think it gives Texas A&M something to play for. I reflect on last year's game. A&M was in complete control of that game, and Missouri losing their experienced quarterback hurts. I mean, it's one thing for a quarterback to come off the bench that the other team hasn't prepared for, but now I believe the Aggies are prepared and primed to go on the road. And man, I hate laying these points because again, it goes against the grain, but I think A&M has a championship in their sights, and I don't think the clock is ready to strike 12 on their season quite yet.
Jeff Sintel, how about you? As Mike said, not a small number necessarily on the road, 7.5 for A&M at Missouri.
I believe the system probably forecast an A&M SEC championship. I believe. I don't know if Mike was going that far with a championship run in order. I think this is one of those games where the SEC reels you back down. I'm not forecasting an A&M loss, but I am forecasting a really tight game. I think Matt Zollers will do very well when he's had a whole week of a bank of reps with the ones. He was a top 3 quarterback in the country in the previous recruiting class. I'd like Missouri to cover. I like these points, this 7.5. I think A&M's going to stay unbeaten, but I think they're going to have to fight for this one. So give me the Tigers.
All right, so split decision here. Connor Riley, what about for you?
I'll be taking Texas A&M this week.
All right, any more you want to expound on that at all?
Well, Dar doesn't think I can win, so there's no real point in me investing in this show. So.
Well, you got to prove me wrong. You got to prove me wrong. You got to go on like some Mike system runs of some 5-1s in a row. I know you got it.
Kaylee Manziel, how about for you?
I don't really know how I'm supposed to follow that up. I guess I'm also gonna take the Aggies. I've been mostly on the wrong side of them this year. They are just dominating teams right now. I think Bo Pribula not playing in this game changes a lot, and I think the slip up for Texas A&M could come against Texas at the end of the year. I don't think it happens at Missouri, so give me Texas A&M.
So Kaylee on the side of Texas A&M. I am also on the side of Texas A&M here too. I think it's interesting when you look at the spread. Obviously, we mentioned Pribula being out, and I mispronounce the name every single time. Him being out, Zollers being in. There's not a ton of respect in the point spread for Pribula here in terms of changing the overall outcome for Missouri, I don't believe. You go after a great start to begin the season, not as strong as of late. Obviously, in this matchup, for a quarterback making his first start with the Mike Elko defense on the other side, that creates a pretty big problem. This is a Missouri team that I liked a lot to begin the season. They were my favorite win total over to begin the year. That was 7.5. They're sitting at 6. They still have games coming against Mississippi State and Arkansas. I still feel pretty good about them going over the win total. But like we said for the Alabama game a couple of weeks ago, you don't have to play close with Alabama to exceed expectations of the season. Feel the same way about this one in the case of Texas A&M. I think Missouri's a good team on its way to a good season. Don't think it's a playoff team. Believe A&M right now has the look that it will be. So on the road, do expect them to cover here in this spot. That puts the flow on the side of Gig'em as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Aggies?
No, I like Missouri. I mean, usually when they're a home dog, they're tough. They're tough, and they usually cover at home. So I like Missouri at home.
So there you go. We'll stay in the SEC now and move ahead to Auburn getting ready to take on Vanderbilt. Of course, Auburn, the big news this week, firing coach Hugh Freeze after what was really an embarrassing loss at home to Kentucky. One of many embarrassing losses for Auburn as of late. Vanderbilt, though, not embarrassing, although disappointing. After being down big against Texas, they do come storming back, try to make it close at the end, ultimately losing 34-31, but still 7-2 on the season, still ranked by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee here this week, still at least theoretically alive for a possible playoff spot. On the flip side of that, Auburn not only lost, scoring just 3 points against Kentucky, now 4-5 on the season. The miserable Hugh Freeze era comes to an end after just six SEC wins. On the flip side of that, though, Vanderbilt has been good at home as the favorite here, 4-1 as a home favorite thus far this season for the Vanderbilt Commodores. Let's go back to Mike Griffith here with Vandy hosting Auburn as a 6.5-point favorite. What do you want to do?
Boy, Brandon, I came into this show ready to take Vanderbilt. I mean, they're playing well. They're on the brink of a playoff appearance, but this line is fishy, and we've talked about it before. 6.5, they're begging you to take Vandy and just give a touchdown to a team that lost its head coach. I'm going to go with matchups and a little bit of Auburn pride here. I don't know how I feel about this, but there's just something bothering me about taking the Commodores, and it really goes against my common sense. But I just call it a gut feeling. I'm going to take Auburn in the points.
So Mike, liking DJ Durkin, the interim head coach for Auburn, and the chance they get a little bit of a boost. We've seen that in some cases, not always so far this season, but in a year in which a lot of coaches have been fired, there have clearly been some examples of improved performance and the extra energy that comes from the interim coaching staff. So Mike on the side of the point spread upset there. Jeff Sintel, what about for you?
I like the home team. I like the fact that Vanderbilt showed a little bit of fight late in that Texas game and didn't roll over. It also says, according to my notes here, that I am contractually obligated to mention regression to the mean a little bit in this topic, since I have not done that and hit my quota for this season's worth of episodes. I think it'll be a happy night on Broadway. I like Vanderbilt to get its 7th win of the season against still a lackluster, tired, kind of wheezing to the finish line of this season Auburn program here.
So split decision there on that. Jeff on the side of the home team. Mike looking for the possibility that the underdog could keep it within inside the number. Connor Riley, we come back to you.
I'll be taking Auburn this week. Dead coach bummed.
So going back to the same point that Mike made a moment ago. Kaylee Manziel, what about for you?
I'm not his biggest fan, but looking at the history of Diego Pavia versus Auburn, first year beat him by 21 points, last year beat him by 10 points. I think this is a Vanderbilt team that still understands that they have somewhat of a chance to make the college football playoff. And I just don't know what Auburn has to play for at this point, so I'm going to take Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kaylee and whoever it was that also said this a little earlier. Man, Vanderbilt just doesn't quit. Came back against Texas. I was really impressed by that. We watched a lot of that leading into the kickoff between Georgia and Florida last week. I am typically one of the biggest to argue in favor of the benefit you get, extra energy from the interim coaching staff. And if anything, maybe Auburn's got a little extra motivation because obviously Vandy beat them a year ago. Some of these players obviously played in that game. But I tell you, Vanderbilt just seems to still be having a really good time. Their fans seem to be really in this right now. And given the fact they're not used to playing with a ranking next to their name, that in itself, I think, probably feels like a certain degree of motivation. They are 6.5-point favorites here. I think they probably cover that number, maybe against my better judgment. But nonetheless, I like them to cover that number. That puts the flow on the side of Vandy as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Vanderbilt?
No, I mean, I'm with Mike on this. I mean, this line smells fishy. I think, coming out of Auburn right now with DJ Durkin is there's a lot of positivity from the players. They're pretty fired up with him. He's a pretty good speaker, motivational type guy that he's made a lot of changes already on the offense. He's going to go to more schematic type stuff. So I think that alone will inspire that team enough to really stay engaged more offensively. We already know Auburn's got a good defense. I think offensively, they're going to be a lot better than they have in the past under Freeze. I think it'll show in this game. And I think Auburn will disappear until maybe they make the Alabama game competitive. But I like Auburn and the points here. I think Vandy still wins at home, but I like Auburn to make this competitive game.
Okay, so some of the thought process there on that. I may have some of that for our next game, but we'll let the picks play out before we get there. Speaking of that next game, obviously you're thinking about one of traditionally what has been one of the bigger games in the SEC in recent years, with Alabama hosting LSU. This year, not quite so much. LSU, after a preseason top 10 ranking to begin the season, has clearly fallen apart, so much so they were blown out 2 weeks ago against Texas A&M. That led to the firing of Brian Kelly, and now a program really left for to pick up the pieces. Still 5-3 on the season. Alabama on the other side, 7-1 on the year thus far this year, and 4-0 as a favorite at home. LSU not quite so lucky, though. The number we have here is Alabama as a 9.5-point favorite here in this spot. Mike Griffith, we come back to you.
Yeah, this is tough. I do want to point out, Dari's comments aside, that I do take some comfort to be on the same team as Connor on these first 3 picks. I consider him a Sharpie. And if he's thinking like I'm thinking, I have a little boost of confidence today, quite frankly, because I've spent the last 3 years chasing him.
I think technically it's a sharp. I think a Sharpie is a marker. I think technically it's a sharp that you aspire to be in this particular
Well,
game.
he's a sharp. He's a sharp, in my opinion, and he will regress to the means and move up in the standings. Is my prediction. He'll finish in the top 2 behind me. That's what the system says, at least. You know, Alabama's won a lot of these games really close, but I just can't get over how good Ty Simpson is and how bad the LSU quarterback situation's been. And so when in doubt, I go with the better quarterback. And I think the Crimson Tide has the better quarterback. I think the bye week has probably been good for them. So give me the Crimson Tide to cover over LSU.
Okay, so Mike on the side of Alabama, obviously a blowout winner against LSU a season ago, and Mike likes them again on Saturday too. Jeff Sintel, what about for you?
This is one of those that the gut feeling company would kind of wonder about this one in terms of, fishy LSU. I just really put forth my confidence in how Alabama played last year and how they slipped up late, and that kept them out of the playoffs with a game like this. I think Ty Simpson is building in Heisman Trophy candidacy. I think Alabama has LSU at home, and I'm also scratching my head. I can't remember if we've ever had 2 interim coaches playing in SEC ball games at this point of the year, especially ones that we're picking. I know why it's a national game. These are 2 national brands. LSU is just not keeping up with its part of the bargain. I got to say Roll Tide on this one.
Okay, so a lot of love for Alabama here right now. Connor, we come back to you.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Alabama here. I think Mike laid out a lot of the really good reasons as why you would take Alabama in this game. Also, LSU can't run the ball, and if you can't run the ball, I just don't see you being able to keep this game close.
Fair enough on that. Kaylee Manziel, what about you? Alabama giving 9.5.
LSU is not a good football team. Give me the Tide.
So I also probably agree with that LSU clearly is not a good football team, at least compared to its expectations. And weirdly enough, I'm taking them plus the points here this week. And I'm trying to explain it this way. I think Alabama could win the national championship. But at the same time, I don't expect them to lose this week necessarily. But I have a little bit of suspicions about Alabama that won't quite go away. I mean, keep in mind, the loss to Florida State to begin the season feels like a long time ago, but it's still happening. Obviously, the Seminoles have been terrible since then. They dominated the early stage of the game against Georgia, but eventually let the Dogs to rush for 200 yards and have a chance to win that game late. And obviously, Georgia had its opportunities. You all remember that. The Tennessee game was in Bryant-Denny Stadium, but that day, Tennessee outgained Alabama, both passing and rushing, had more first downs, were really probably the better offensive team. And if not for a 14-point swing with a pick 6, that game could have felt differently. In other words, even with Alabama ranked number 4 and trending in a very, very strong direction right now, there have been some canaries in the coal mine that suggest, maybe there's a pump of the brakes coming. No one sees it for this particular weekend for all the reasons everybody else has, I would say, both accurately and eloquently laid out. And I'm still not quite so sure. You look at the last 4 games between these 2 teams, Bama's been the better team in each year, the better program overall. But within the last 4 years, LSU has won straight up. They did that in 2022. They're 2-2 in their last 4 against Alabama against the spread. So they've been relatively competitive, even though Alabama has had far more end-of-season success. That's enough for me to take a flyer plus 9.5. Just because sometimes college football is crazy. This is the upset, at least from a point spread standpoint, that I kind of like this weekend. The flow, Dari, though, is on Alabama. It probably should be. You want to go with the flow and take the Crimson Tide.
LSU always gets throttled when they go to Tuscaloosa. Usually when they have a chance to beat them, it's in Baton Rouge, a night game, hostile environment. Everything says to take Alabama here, but I like the points in LSU. I think something crazy is going to happen in this game. They're going to already talking about mixing up their quarterbacks. He's got a battle cry, but Pearl Harbor scenario where he's trying to fire up this team to finish strong at the end of the year. Frank Wilson's from New Orleans. He's from that area. So he connects a lot with the players. I think this is their fight. I don't think they win. I also think Alabama's got kind of circled next week with Oklahoma. So they're probably kind of looking past this, just assuming, Brian Kelly's gone. LSU's not that good. I like this. I think this game's going to be a close game. So give me the Tigers and the points.
To dive a little deeper on this, Wilson fits my template for what I think of as the successful interim coach, the popular assistant, the good cop, so to speak, in a way that, at least based on my perception, DJ Durkin for Auburn probably quite doesn't. So that is interesting. Now, I'll also remind you this, if you'll check out the Friday edition of DawgNation Daily and our R.S. Andrews Cool Down at the end of the show, we'll give you our official pick for a big game in the Big Ten as Oregon, number 9 in the top 25 this week, according to the selection committee, travels to Iowa, surprisingly ranked 20th by the CFP committee after being unranked in the AP and Coaches Bowl prior to that. It's a big game in the Big Ten, coach that a lot of Georgia fans know a lot about, and Dan Lanning. We'll give you that as a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down on the Friday edition of DawgNation Daily. We'll also have a big pick outside the SEC coming up here in a moment, too. Prior to that, though, let me remind you that Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, is brought to you by, as I said, R.S. Andrews. You think about them for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time, do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That's what R.S. Andrews is all about. We're coming up on a Thanksgiving time of year. Got a lot of friends and family staying over at your house, extra people there. That means extra strain on your plumbing. Don't let a water heater going out or some sort of pipe issue. Don't let that ruin your Thanksgiving and your holiday time. Go ahead and get that water heater replaced. If you reach out to R.S. Andrews, the RS stands for Rapid Service. They may be able to replace it for you the same day. And if you have the clogged sinks and the things like that, the plumbing experts with R.S. Andrews are there to do good work for you and all of that. So check out rsandrews.com for a lot more on that today. That is rsandrews.com. Okay, with that said, we'll step outside the SEC for a big game in the Big 12 where the Texas Tech Red Raiders get ready to play host to the BYU Cougars. Texas Tech has taken a loss this season, but still ranked number 8 this week, and also a 9.5 point favorite against BYU. BYU is unbeaten, but ranked below all the other unbeatens and that collection of one-loss teams there at the top. They've been strong against away from home this season. Obviously, Provo a very strong home field advantage, but they've done okay leaving those friendly confines here this season too. 9.5 point underdogs on the road. By the way, the tortillas have been, I guess, banned from Lubbock, so no tradition there on that. But nonetheless, Texas Tech is a 9.5 point favorite. Big one in the Big 12. Mike Griffith, what do you think?
BYU is an impressive program. I had an opportunity to spend some time out there in the Intermountain region, and certainly Lavelle Edwards built a great program, won the 1984 national championship. I looked on their schedule, and earlier this year when they traveled to Colorado, they only won by 3 points. Now, granted, this Colorado team is given up and looks really bad now, but still, Texas Tech has a lot of money invested in this program in this season. They're at home. There's not a lot of reasons to go to Lubbock, Texas, other than to play football for money. And you're not going to make as much money if you don't win these kind of games and win decisively. So I think we had Texas Tech and maybe Houston earlier this year. They covered a big number then. I believe they're going to cover the big number now.
Yeah, pretty impressive win for them against a Houston team that's played pretty well for the most part this season. Jeff Sintel, what about for you?
I like the Cougars here, not to win, but to cover. You look at BYU, yes, they're unbeaten. BYU usually shocks an opponent like this every season. But what else they have is they have a lot of pieces. They have 2 500-yard receivers. They got an 800-yard tailback, and they got a quarterback making some plays, even though he has an unorthodox jersey number. Swirl that all together. I like BYU to cover the spread.
It's 47, right? He's wearing 47. Is that right, Jeff?
That's correct.
That is quite an unorthodox jersey number. Connor Riley, what about you?
I like Texas Tech here. They're the more talented team. They need this game more, and I think the Big 12 needs them to need this game more. So give me Texas Tech to cover that number.
So Connor also on the side of Texas Tech here. Kaylee, what about you?
I'm going to refer back to something that Brandon said last week that I totally ignored, and he was totally right. But when you have a team that's ranked ahead of another team and the team below them is favored by this large of a spread, Vegas is trying to tell you something. So give me the Raiders.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably exactly right. I'm also on Texas Tech in this spot too. I have them as covering 6 straight games at home. I don't always think of Lubbock as being the best of Big 12 home environments, but it's been pretty friendly for the Red Raiders as of late. And while the numbers don't exactly bear this out, I think of BYU as being a pretty strong home road split type of team. Like I said, they've been fine away from home. One of their losses last year was at home. So it's not the actual reality doesn't match perception necessarily, but I just feel like this is probably a pretty big spot for Texas Tech. It's why they're such a large favorite. But as Connor said, they've also constructed a much better roster overall. BYU, good team, but Texas Tech, more of a legitimate contender. And I think this is the kind of game they've likely have circled. The Big 12 could still get 2 teams into the college football playoff, but one of those is going to probably be Texas Tech, which means it probably stands up at home here on Saturday. Big one way out there in Lubbock. Dari, the flow is on the side of the Red Raiders. You want to go with the flow and take Texas Tech.
Yeah, I mean, you got college game day coming there. I haven't been that impressed with BYU with the games that I've seen. I think Patrick Mahomes will be on site. He'll probably be at game day. He'll probably be that guest speaker. The Chiefs are on the bye this week. So I think that crowd's going to be fired up. I think it's going to be no problem for Texas Tech to cover the double-digit point spread here.
I'm actually, even as a big SEC homer, relatively excited about this game. I think that should be a lot of fun. BYU going to Texas Tech, expecting that to be a pretty big one. Now, speaking of big games outside the SEC, if you'll join us on the Friday edition of DawgNation Daily at the conclusion of the broadcast for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down, we'll give you a pick about Oregon traveling all the way to Iowa City to take on the Hawkeyes. Iowa City to take on the Hawkeyes. We will give you that, plus our best bets for the weekend, too. But for those of you who've got your own picks for Georgia, Mississippi State, and Texas A&M and Missouri, the other big games of the weekend, best of luck with those selections. And we hope you'll join us next week at this same time for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We'll look forward to talking to you then.